the people of the US in particular, having regard to what Bush has done over all of these years, to determine what best we can do now. Unfortunately, Obama is frightened in many ways. I mean, you have to understand that in the United States, the true power, the real power behind the government and behind the president lies with people you don't see. And of course, Obama has loyalties and also has pressure from pressure groups and from lobbies to basically pursue a course of action, and particularly when it comes to foreign policy, pursue a foreign policy which is what they want to see happen. And I mean, the Voice of the World wrote personally to Obama at the time that he was elected, making it very clear what he needed to do. And you know, we've got very little change. In fact, where we should have seen the total withdrawal of US forces and UK forces from Iraq and Afghanistan, this has not happened. To the contrary, we have now an increase and a build-up in Afghanistan, and the situation is that it's never ending, and there's no end in sight, and there's no way of knowing just how long they're going to be there for. The Voice of the World has made it very clear that they are there for the long term. They will ensure that whoever's in power, in the form of Hamid Karzai in Afghanistan, is their own man. They put him there. He's an ex-Unicol man. And so, you know, the Afghanistan people are really not living in any form of democracy. And if you want to know, after 9 years since October 2001, when Bush invaded Afghanistan, how much progress, how much improvement we've seen, either to the political situation, to the security situation, or more particularly to the financial affairs and the general welfare of the mass of the population in Afghanistan. And I venture to say that it's worse than it's ever been, and that none of the replacement of infrastructure, the organisations that go to make up a democratic government, are still not in place in Afghanistan. And then of course come back to Iraq, and the deaths of civilians in Iraq is just an ongoing situation, and the security of the average person in Iraq defies description. And but again, looking at any gains that have been made since the 1st of May 2003, when Bush declared that combat operations had ceased in Iraq, let's have a look at the improvements that have taken place in the lives of the Iraqi people. Nothing whatsoever has improved. It's worse than it's ever been. At least under Saddam Hussein, people could afford the basic necessities. They had water, they had electricity, they had income, and the cost of living was reasonable. People could manage a reasonable standard and level of existence under Saddam. But now you have a situation where the most ludicrous situation is the fact that whilst Iraq has so much oil, the ordinary Iraqi people are having to queue for miles and miles and wait for hours, days if you like, to be able to buy fuel, petrol, for their cars. And of course, don't even talk about the actual cost of the fuel, because it's nothing like it was, for instance, in the time of Saddam, or compare the cost of fuel in Iraq to the cost of fuel in Iran. And, you know, it's very easy to see that the Iraqi people are so much worse off from every perspective that, you know, it goes without saying. We hope that sooner than later that we're going to see a complete and utter withdrawal of US forces and UK forces from Iraq, so that the people of Iraq can take their country back and take their future and back into their own hands, and obviously see the sorts of improvements in the everyday security and economic situation that the Iraqi people are entitled to after unbelievable suffering. The suffering that those people have endured, and they've not done anything to anybody, is just absolutely unbelievable. And the crimes which have been committed by Bush, and the mass murder, the terrorism of using weapons of mass destruction against unarmed civilians, is a war crime. Bush and Blair need to be held responsible for all of their conduct, all of their crimes, all of the pain and suffering and the loss and damage that the Iraqi people have sustained over all of these years. There were no weapons. There was no threat ever from Iraq or Saddam Hussein to the continental United States. In particular, Saddam Hussein, in that final interview on the CBS 60 Minutes program with Dan Rather, made it very clear that he wanted an international televised satellite debate with President Bush, whereby he could put the position of Iraq. Bush had the opportunity of being able to justify why it was that the United States and the UK should invade Iraq. But of course, Saddam Hussein's offer was shrugged aside by the White House as saying, not serious. So it's quite clear that Saddam Hussein was very well aware of the fact that there was every possibility that Bush and Blair were going to invade his country, and naturally enough, nothing could be more serious than that, particularly when it came to his own life and well-being, apart from the threat to his position as the President of Iraq. And every effort was made, both by Iraq, by the United Nations, by France, by Germany, by Russia, by China, as well as 1 million people who marched in the UK against the invasion. And Bush and Blair couldn't care less at all about the opinions of the rest of the world and went ahead anyway. But Saddam was doing his utmost to be able to prevent this invasion. But the thing is that they knew all the way along that there were no weapons. They knew that there was no justification for this invasion, and of course they couldn't risk a live television interview or debate with Saddam for the reasons that we've made absolutely clear in the Voice of the World, was that there was no evidence to support the invasion, and that all of the reasons that were given the invasion were completely made up, and there were no weapons, there was no threat, and Bush and Blair, of course, couldn't risk the possibility of being shown up as frauds before the invasion took place. So, of course, they did everything to decline any offer that Saddam had made to openly debate the merits of this proposed invasion for these reasons.